Will Hild is the executive director of consumers research, and he joins me now to discuss how his organization's fighting back against this corporate ridiculousness. Will, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
So there was a quote, I love this because I remember when this happened. When Michael Jordan, it was a story that was written about what you're doing, when Michael Jordan wouldn't endorse a candidate running against Jesse Helms for Senate in '90, he said, well, yeah, Republicans buy sneakers too, which almost seems, you would never hear a reply like that from, like a LeBron James or anybody else. What happened to that sentiment? Why did people choose to go a different path?
Well, the Consumers First Initiative simple message is that these companies are going woke in order to distract from their mistreatment of their customers. So the difference there is Michael Jordan, at the time, Nike, I think, was in a much better place with their issues. I mean, now there's congressional reports coming out that suggest they're using forced labor in China to make their shoes. So, this is a trend that is increased in the last 4 or 5 years. We've seen just an explosion in this strategy by companies, most of whom have real issues, skeletons in their closet that they're trying to distract from.
Yeah, it's and this situation with Nike too, particularly. I don't know anyone that likes Nike anymore, and I'd be interested in seeing just how much of an impact these decisions that they have. Because to me, Will, saying the stuff that they were saying even before Georgia's law passed, but saying the stuff that they were saying while simultaneously having their products that are in their commercials made by people who are in detention camps, a minority in China in a detention camp, seems a little ironic.
Absolutely. I don't think it's an accident. This is a strategy, again, as I said, that you're seeing more and more companies deploy as they're having problems. Take American Airlines, for example, another company that we've targeted. This is an organization that's been rated the nation's worst airline 2 years in a row by the Wall Street Journal. They lose the most bags. They kick the most passengers off of flights involuntarily. And last year, we reached out to them and they confirmed to us that they have continued to reduce legroom during the COVID pandemic. And of course, this was a period of time in which they got a multi-billion-dollar taxpayer-funded bailout. So they go out and they take positions on election integrity legislation in states like Texas. They're doing this to distract. They're doing this to distract from their mistreatment of their customers, their failures as a business. Since we launched the ads, things have gotten worse at American. They've had to announce that they're moving to save money. They're moving to single agent boarding on many of their flights. And they got caught asking some of their employees to come in and work for free, to volunteer in order to make ends meet. And so, again, they need to be focusing on their customer. They need to be focusing on turning their business around, not trying to cozy up to woke politicians to distract from their CEO Doug Parker's 8-figure paycheck last year.
Yeah, that's a really good point, too. The last time I flew in American, I thought it was odd that I had to wear the mask, still because the virus, everything's super contagious except when it's not. But then the plane was so dirty, there was chunks of food on the seat. I had to reclean the whole area. Thankfully, I've always done that anyway. So, it's helped when you're, a germophobic, anal retentive person. Talking with Will Hild of whose advocacy group has been going off on these woke corporations. Well, not just with Coca-Cola and Nike, and we're talking about American Airlines as well. I know that there's always been advocacy groups that I think even back since I was in school in the 90s where they would yell at corporations. They would want corporations to act a certain way. You would have boycotts and the like. But companies never really, at least maybe as publicly as they do now, we didn't see them actually kind of focus group testing the direction of their company and you didn't see them actually becoming hostile to part of their consumer group, any of their customers based on politics. And that, I just don't know how sustainable something like that is. When did you all kind of notice, obviously you guys are the experts on this, but when did that really actually become part of a corporate policy to just really take direction from these groups?
Yeah, you saw a few companies pioneer this, Nike being one of them. Part of the reason I think they've been doing this for so long is they've had labor supply issues for so long. They've had lots of criticism of where they were making their shoes, how they were treating the people that make them. And then I think it just caught on from there. A lot of companies saw the left-wing media cover for Nike, and they said, hey, well, if they can do it, we can do it too. So if you've got a labor issue like Nike does, like for example, Coca-Cola, also strong evidence that they're getting sugar from companies in China that used forced labor. if you've got other issues going on in your companies, mistreatment of your customers, unhealthy products, then this is a great way to get, lots of good coverage in Washington Post, New York Times, and mainstream media will cover for you. And many of the issues that normally would be covered by those publications, to criticizing these corporations, those suddenly go away as long as you're willing to cozy up to woke activists and woke politicians. And that's really the simple message of the Consumer First Initiative: is stop trying to cozy up to woke politicians, focus on your customers, focus on fixing your products.
Yeah, we're playing for folks watching on the first, one of the clips that they had was the polar bear holding up the soda saying, "Be less white." I remember when that came out, I'm like, what in the world? That was like their diversity training that they had, "Be less white." What does this do to people who, and I realize that there's a lot of psychology in marketing, a lot of psychology in advertising. In fact, you could say that it kind of is predicated upon the psychology, understanding consumer habits and behaviors and what attracts people to certain products. And I know that, for instance, Coke and Pepsi used to compete. I just remember all of the ads where they competed against each other to see which cola would be coolest. Kind of the same thing with Apple and IBM. It really was a branding. It was a form of for the customer to really brand themselves and identify without having to tell people. Like if you, where they had the Mac and PC commercials, and the PC guy was the nerdy dude, and the Apple guy was the real cool guy. I mean, people like that branding. They wanted to brand themselves that way. And the same thing goes with like luxury items. People like the status that it confers without them having to tell people. So what does this, would you say that political affiliation now in terms of products, is that also a status now? And is that what they're trying to switch to market?
I wouldn't even think it's as genuine as that. I really don't think this has much to do with, focusing on their bottom line and trying to sell products, as it does trying to cover from the problems that they've got, the use of forced labor. Take Nike again, for example. This is a company that their CEO just got on an investor call, and during the call said that they were a company of China for China. Well, what does that tell you about where they see their priorities? These are American brands, supposedly, like Coca-Cola. Again, you talk about branding. I mean, what company has tried harder to identify itself with the United States than Coca-Cola? And yet they are out cavorting with our frenemy, China. They are the top tier sponsor of the Beijing Olympics, something no less than Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said ought to be boycotted by American companies because of the human rights abuses in China. And it looks like Coca-Cola is benefiting from those human rights abuses. They congressional evidence suggests that they're getting sugar that's been harvested by forced labor. So again, I don't even think it's a matter of, hey, let's have this luxury idea of being a Democrat or something like that in order to sell more Coke. I really think it comes down to, we need to expand in China, that we're cozying up to America's frenemy. As we're a trading partner, but we're obviously a rival of China's. And instead of facing up to that and figuring out which country they're going to be loyal to, they try to have it both ways, and they get coverage from that from the New York Times, Washington Post, liberal media, liberal woke politicians and activists, by cozying up, by taking these divisive positions on legislation they have no expertise in. They know nothing about running an election. They know it's not germane to their business model. They are simply speaking. In fact, many of the times that they issue statements, they get them factually wrong about what's in the legislation itself. So again, I think this has less to do with the bottom line, except that they don't want to be called out for using forced labor and for selling out an American mainstay like Coca-Cola to China.